I opened a hive expecting the worst. The entrance had gone quiet over the past 2 weeks. The population had visibly thinned, and every sign pointed toward a colony that was already past saving. Most beekeepers would have written this one off. Instead, I want to walk you through exactly what I found, exactly what I did, and exactly why it worked. Because the difference between a dead hive and a saved one usually comes down to knowing which of a very small number of moves actually gives a struggling colony a real chance. Here's the full story. The first thing I want to be honest about is what a truly collapsing colony actually looks like from the outside, because it is not dramatic. There was no obvious disaster, no pile of dead bees, no robbing frenzy. Just a hive that had been strong a month earlier and was now visibly, quietly thinning out. Fewer bees on the frames, less traffic at the entrance, a general sense of a population in decline rather than a population under active attack. That quiet decline is actually the most dangerous kind because it does not announce itself. A hive that is being robbed or that has an obvious disease outbreak at least tells you clearly that something is wrong. A colony that is simply losing bees faster than it replaces them looks, for weeks, like nothing more than a slower hive. By the time it looks obviously bad, the population has often already crossed a threshold where recovery on its own is unlikely. So the first lesson, before I even opened the box, was this. I was already behind because I had let a slow decline run for longer than I should have before taking it seriously. When I actually opened the hive, the diagnosis became clear fast, and it is worth walking through exactly how, because this is the process that matters more than any single fix. I went straight to the frames in the center of the brood nest because that is where the truth about a colony lives. I was not looking at how many bees were flying. I was looking for eggs. Eggs are tiny, about the size of a grain of rice, and a healthy, actively laying queen leaves fresh eggs standing upright in cells, which tells you she was there within the last 3 days. I found capped brood, some older larvae, but no eggs and no young larvae anywhere in the nest. That absence was the whole diagnosis. The queen had been gone for at least several days, likely longer, and the colony had been coasting on brood she laid before she disappeared. There was a second signal that confirmed it. The colony was loud and unsettled during the inspection in a way a queen-right hive typically is not, and it did not calm back down the way a hive with a laying queen usually does once you close it up. Queenless colonies often have this restless, agitated quality, and combined with the missing eggs, I had my answer. This was not a mite problem, not a starvation problem, not a disease problem. This was a colony that had lost its queen and was quietly running out the clock on the workers it had left. Quick word before I go on. Everything I've learned about diagnosing and rescuing struggling colonies, reading brood patterns, timing the moves that actually work, and knowing when to save versus when to combine, I gathered it all into the Hive Vault over at dejup.com. The link's in the description below and on the channel page if you want it. This video's free and always will be. The Vault's just the long version for folks who want the whole thing. I won't mention it again. Here is the decision that actually saved this hive. And it is the decision most beginners get wrong, in exactly the way I almost got wrong myself. The instinct when you find a queenless hive is to re-queen it. Order a new queen or let the colony try to raise its own emergency queen from young larvae. And in a hive with a strong population, that is often the right call. But this colony had already thinned out too far. It did not have the workforce left to properly care for and defend a new queen through the introduction period. And it did not have enough nurse bees to feed and warm a new round of brood, even if a queen started laying again. Trying to save this specific colony by itself at this population level was very likely to fail regardless of how good the new queen was. A weak colony given a new queen is still a weak colony. You have fixed the missing piece, but not the underlying population problem. So instead of requeening it in place, I combined it with a stronger, queen-right colony I had nearby. This is the move that actually saved the bees, even though it meant the collapsing hive as its own separate colony ceased to exist. The workers, the brood, and the resources from the failing hive joined a healthy population that already had a laying queen, immediately giving those bees a colony with the numbers and the leadership to actually function. You are not losing the bees when you combine. You are giving them the one thing the failing hive could no longer provide on its own: enough workers to be a colony again. Let me walk through exactly how I did the combine, because doing it correctly is what prevents it from turning into a disaster of its own. First, I confirmed there was no queen and no queen cells present in the weak hive before combining. This matters enormously. If there had been a queen or an emerging queen cell in that box, combining without dealing with that first could have led to the two queens finding and fighting each other, which sometimes ends with both of them dead and the combined colony worse off than either hive was before. I checked carefully, frame by frame, and confirmed the hive was genuinely, hopelessly queenless, with nothing in progress to change that. Second, I used the newspaper method, which is the standard, low-drama way to merge two bee populations without triggering a fight. I placed a single layer of newspaper over the top of the strong, queen-right colony's upper box, poked a handful of small slits in it with my hive tool so the bees would have a starting point, and then set the weak hive's box directly on top of the paper. That is the entire mechanical process. No shaking bees together, no forcing contact. The reason this works is almost elegant. The two populations are separated by the paper at first, which means they cannot immediately fight, but they can smell each other through and around it, and over the following day or two, the bees on both sides gradually chew through the newspaper from opposite directions. By the time the paper is gone and full contact happens, the colonies have had time to intermix their scents gradually, and the aggressive, defensive response that direct dumping together would trigger has been mostly diffused. When I checked back a few days later, the paper was gone, the two populations had merged, and there was no sign of significant fighting. Third, I did not touch it again for about 2 weeks. This is the part that is hardest for an anxious beekeeper, myself included. But interference right after a combine is one of the most common ways people undo the benefit of doing it correctly. I gave the merged colony time to settle, let the single queen re-establish her rhythm across the combined population, and only went back in after enough time had passed that a quick check would tell me clearly whether it had taken. When I did check back in, the signs were exactly what you want to see: a solid, calm colony, working the combined resources of both original hives, a clearly present laying queen with fresh eggs visible in the brood nest, and a population that, instead of being two separate struggling groups, was now one hive with the numbers to defend itself, keep its brood warm, and build toward the season ahead. That is the actual save, not a dramatic rescue with a miracle product. A correct diagnosis. Go straight to the brood nest, look for eggs, trust the absence of eggs over the presence of flying bees, followed by an honest assessment of whether the population was strong enough to be saved on its own, and then the patience to do a proper newspaper combine and leave it alone long enough to work. Here are the mistakes that would have turned this into a dead hive instead of a saved one. Mistake 1 would have been judging the colony by the entrance instead of the brood nest. Entrance activity is the last thing to decline in a failing colony and tells you almost nothing. The eggs told me everything the entrance never would have. Mistake 2 would have been trying to requeen a population that was already too thin to support the introduction. A new queen does not fix a colony that no longer has enough workers to raise brood and defend itself. Mistake 3 would have been dumping the two colonies together without the newspaper. Direct combination without a buffer period is a common way to trigger real fighting between two established worker populations. Mistake 4 would have been opening the combined hive too soon afterward. Interference during the settling period disrupts the very process that makes the combine succeed. Mistake 5 would have been not checking for queen cells before combining. Missing an emerging queen in the queenless hive can lead to two queens meeting inside the combined colony, with a real risk the fight leaves the whole hive worse off. Picture the version of this story where I got it wrong. I see a quiet hive, assume it just needs feeding, and do nothing about the actual problem. Or I order a new queen for a colony too weak to support her. Or I combine the two hives without the newspaper and come back to find a mess of dead bees on the bottom board. Any one of those paths ends the same way. A colony I could have saved, gone. Instead, the diagnosis was right. The decision to combine rather than requeen alone was right. The method was right, and the patience was right. And what was a quietly dying, queenless hive 2 weeks ago is now bees, brood, and resources folded into a strong, thriving colony that will carry that population through the rest of the season. Drop a comment and tell me whether you've ever had to diagnose a queenless hive and what tipped you off. I read every single one at Dale's Hive. And if you want the full guide to diagnosing and rescuing struggling colonies, it's waiting in the vault at daleshive.com. Link in the description. Subscribe and turn on notifications because next week we're covering exactly how to tell a failing queen from a genuinely queenless hive, so you know which fix the colony actually needs. The hive looked collapsing. It wasn't dead, it just needed the right diagnosis and the right move. Now you know both.